Chapter 81 to 84. Another awkward silence filled the room as everything felt rather suffocating all of the sudden. I'm sure the others could feel the tension in the air. And a lot of things I thought I didn't have to deal with came bursting back up to the surface. Feelings I thought I had gotten over, repressed, or merely outgrew. I was a whole mix of emotions right now. Yet, I was surprisingly calm. I did not lash out, get overwhelmed with rage or simply sneer and dismiss the man in front of me. I guess I have grown up a tad in the past couple years. Who are you? I asked, with complete confusion. He blinked for a moment, a gentle smile appearing on his face. I'm Okita Tsuji, your fath. Never heard of you. I cut him off, clearly to his dissatisfaction, even if he didn't outwardly react. Well, I never said I wasn't a petty asshole sometimes. Okita Tsuji. Yasaka interrupted. What is the meaning of this? Her voice sounded very authoritative, and even Okita almost stood at attention. He seemed rather sheepish with his response. I am under orders to bring back my king's son. He replied. So you stroll into a meeting I'm having, uninvited, with the ones who rescued my daughter? She narrowed her eyes. Rescued your daughter? He repeated, slightly confused as realization dawned on him. I apologize for my rudeness, Lady Yasaka, I mean no disrespect. He bowed, perhaps lower than he should have being an emissary of a foreign dignitary. And there is a but coming. Yasaka interrupted. He winced slightly. I am under direct orders to bring him back, please step aside, Lady Yasaka. And what if I do not? She stood up, her tail swayed behind her dangerously. Her ears no longer had a lazy droop to them, they stood at attention and she was ready to fight. Gone was her flirtatious facade she usually keeps, now was the destructive fox who boasted the acknowledgement as one of the strongest yokai who ever existed. It isn't just me you would have to contend with. He replied. Are you threatening me, boy? Yasaka growled out and the room shook, the faintest manifestation of her tuki began to leak into the surroundings. I placed a hand on Kunu's shoulder as she trembled slightly. She looked up at me and I gave her a quick wink. Only a light sigh cut away all the tension that was accumulating. All eyes turned to Izanami who sat there quietly. Rarely have I ever found myself in a situation where I am ignored so blatantly. Her voice was quiet, yet it could grab the attention of the world if she so wished it. Okita's eyes widened, his hand gripped his sword instinctively as he took several steps back. Who are you? His voice didn't tremble, but there was the clear distinction of hesitance present. You were born upon this land that I created, and you ask who I am? Her head turned slowly. Shadows began climbing up the walls, reminiscent of hands as all the light in the area was consumed, snuffed out, and otherwise refused to even persist within her presence. Her red eyes glowed, the shadowy tendrils wrapping around her. Yasaka was already right next to me, wrapping up Kunu protectively. I couldn't help but step in front of them, just in case. Watching this scene as the shadows were getting ready to practically strangle him, I couldn't help but feel something odd. With a sigh, I opened my mouth. Izzy, stop. Abruptly as they came the shadows dispersed and Izzy was sitting there as if nothing happened. Her eyes turned to me, clearly wanting an answer. This is my mess, let me clean it up. I do not fear the strongest devil. Izzy snorted. Never said you did, but it's not your problem. If you are involved then it is my problem. Trust me, please. She let out another snort, turning her head. Do what you want. Words can't express how happy I am that someone would stand up for me, regardless of my strength or my ability to handle the situation. But on the flip side, I didn't want to get you wrapped up in this if I didn't have to. Fear him you may not, but it would still be annoying for you and I don't want you to have to deal with that annoyance on my behalf. Not to mention how Yasaka would be swept up in this if anything happened to Okita in such a situation. Okita didn't relax as he stared at us conversing as if nothing had happened. It was clear by the look on his face that he had no idea what was going on. You want to take me back? I refuse. I took a step forward, staring him in the eyes. Even if there are people that want to see you? He was apparently trying a different approach. Your grandmother had expressed desire in meeting you. He tried to give me a disarming smile. Not to mention your father has been asking about you. That did give me pause. I was not blinded by hate or anything like that. I was able to recognize that they were not involved in any nonsense around me. I knew about them, but I guess this is the first time I'm truly contemplating them. I have a brother. What an odd thought. And my grandmother apparently wished to meet me? I don't have much in the way of knowledge about them. Regardless, I only had one response for emotional blackmail. Fuck off. He let out another sigh. You're pretty skilled with your blade, why not bet on that? He tried a third approach. Well, I can't say I didn't see this coming. Oh, you want to wager on the outcome of a duel? If I win, you come with me. He nodded. It was most certainly the path of least resistance. It may just seem like the obvious choice for a warrior like him, but doing this he also worked around all the politics revolved around taking one of Yasaka's guests. Everyone had their own pride. Could the Yukai even raise their heads to express dissatisfaction if both sides agreed on a duel? And what if I win? He paused a moment, deep in thought. What do you want? You want me to relinquish my life into your hands? Is it not appropriate for you to do the same? He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Very well. Yasaka still looked annoyed as she gazed at Okita. I have somewhere you can fight, and I will be judge. Her words leaving no room for argument. She glanced back down at Kunu, who seemed to want to stay by my side, and I held back a small laugh at Yasaka's defeated expression. Come along, Okita. It will be one last stroll through Kyoto, for regardless of the outcome, you will no longer be welcome here. Okita looked resolved. Please. He bowed again, but Yasaka didn't even spare him another glance. As they left the room, a little kitsune started grabbing onto my sleeve, giving me a worried look. He's strong, she said quietly. My heart melted at the way she looked at me. I couldn't help but pat her on the head. Don't worry, your daddy is the strongest. Her cheeks reddened, and it just made me want to tease her even more. Men and their stupid pride. Izzy muttered, standing up. In the classifications that devils use, Okita Tsuji is an ultimate class. Indeed. I was well aware of where he ranked. As far as night pieces go, he was one of the top. And you have qualms about his strength? She asked. This is not like the nonsense we got up to the other day. She looked uncharacteristically worried. Even if you have several blessings, he has lived a long life by mortal standards, that isn't something one can overcome with ease. I gave her a reassuring smile. Don't worry, I was trained by the best. There was an arena nearby. I wasn't too surprised. Yukai in general are a bit on the aggressive side, so it made sense for there to be a place for them to fight without causing disturbances. It was rather empty though, minus a few guards here and there keeping watch, Yasaka acting as referee, and Izzy standing to the side with Kunu right next to her. It was slightly amusing to see Izzy acting all protective of the little kitsune. There was no great declarations as I walked to my side of the arena, opposite of Okita. Yasaka being the judge was more a formality than anything, her duty as the leading of the area this was taking place. She didn't need to incite us to battle, nor give us the K to fight. I looked at my opponent. He placed a hand on his sheathed sword. I tilted my head, and brought out Mirage from my ring. The glowing blade caught his immediate interest, but his eyes turned back to me. A part of me was genuinely curious how he matched up against those I've fought in the past. Where his skill level laid, even if his pure power wasn't a match for the likes of those I knew. My circuits ignited. Reinforcement filled my body. Ebony flesh was cast over me. My dragon's heart flared. My magical energy burst out in a torrent. The boosted gear stayed hidden in my soul, and my primordial runes still remained in reserve. I did not wish to reveal all my trump cards for something of this level. A lion gives birth to a lion. Okita let out a small laugh as he drew his sword. Well, I would start then. With a flick of my wrist, Mirage swung out. 10 birds. Okita reacted immediately, his body moving in a practiced manner that indicated decades upon decades of honing. Left, right, up, down. His sword collided with all my sword phantoms, dispersing them with relative ease. He moved right as the final clash ended. His speed was very impressive to the point where I had to actually focus. I planted my foot, and swung using my entire body. Our swords collided at the space where nothing had been a half-second prior, filling the entire arena with a massive shockwave. His strength was also worth noting. I think he may even be physically stronger than me, which was very surprising. Though it wasn't enough to completely overpower my blow, just more of a slight advantage on his part. He pushed forward, sliding under the blow as he recalled his blade from the slash, trying to get under my guard. Flipping Mirage upside down, I caught the quick slash and followed up with a crackle of lightning that erupted from my hand, pointing right at his face. He didn't even budge as something emerged from his skin. An insect-like creature emerged, intercepting the blow and trying to bite at me. I was momentarily surprised at such a thing before I recalled what exactly was going on. I grabbed it before it could reach me, turning it into dust with my free hand. So it is true, you incubate mindless yokai in your body. Not all yokai are the sentient species that walk around Kyoto. Some are mindless monsters, that rely on their baser instincts. Okita Tsuji raises them within his body and uses them for his own purposes. Sorry kiddo, can't really go too easy on you here. He chuckled, jumping back and gaining some distance. I'll have to get serious then. All of a sudden his presence shifted. He stepped, and vanished. I couldn't help but have my eyes widened as I felt the air next to me distort. I moved my head back as a blade swept right where it had been a moment prior. That was probably 10 times faster than his previous movements. And I just smiled. Another sword swept at me, his body not even visible to the naked eye anymore. It would have actually been easier if he was teleporting, I had a sense for the fluctuation of space, but no. This was pure speed and I had to rely on my own skill to meet him. As his blade touched my skin, space shattered and I was behind him, sword lunging for his heart. With a burst of speed, he vanished again, only to reappear a foot to the side, and counter-attacking. What ridiculous speed, but it wasn't something I was unused to, he still fell short to scat hack. His thrusts were sharp and quick, if I showed any opening, his blade tip was already digging into my skin. I was sporting small cuts all over my body now, but nothing more than flesh wounds. I gave as much as I received, he only smiled when my sword cut into his cheek, and narrowly missed his neck, only to draw a thin line of blood. I shared his expression when his sword stabbed towards my eye and I moved the least amount necessary to avoid any major damage, getting the side of my head cut in the process. To create an opening, I allowed him to nick my arm a bit deeper than I normally would have allowed, but I returned with a follow-up slash. His eyes widened at my attack, but he burst out in Tuki for a brief moment, eclipsing his normal use to move quicker than before and enhance his physical ability, but even so, he didn't anticipate the power behind my attack, and his footing got blown away before regaining himself on the other side of the arena. 100 birds. Mirage glowed as I swung. The sky filled with my sword phantoms and Okita looked surprised for the first time in this fight, but he smiled a moment later. A numbers game. I can do that too. His body shuddered and hundreds upon hundreds of yokai burst out and overcame my numerous sword phantoms, but they continued on towards me. I couldn't count how many there were in this short moment, nor if I even had a few hours to work with. Serpents, insects, poisonous creatures of many kinds. They all composed of this swarm that bared down on me. I held out my hand and another sword answered my call. Without even moving, I held it up and called its name. Ascalon. My noble phantasm activated. The blessed blade by which force is slain. A nearly impenetrable defense swept around me, my sword moving in ways that was nearly impossible, but struck down every yokai that attempted to reach me. Body parts fell down onto the arena, blood sprinkled down almost like rain. What a monster. Okita sighed. You know, I had been raising those for years. I'm the monster. I raised an eyebrow. You aren't even using your Tennin Rishin Ryu, I snorted. Not to mention any of the stronger yokai you keep in your body. In fact, you're only using your Tuki for basic enhancements. He laughed awkwardly at my statement. Those sword techniques are meant for nothing but killin'. He scratched his cheek. Besides, I ain't the only one holding back. He didn't deny my other accusations. Guilty. I smirked. Honestly, it was hard to hate this man. Even when he was trying to take me back, he didn't really seem to like what he was doing. If anything, I would say his biggest flaw is his loyalty to his master. Call it my own pride, but I didn't want to stomp on someone whose heart wasn't even in the fight. I could easily see he did not wish to be fighting me under these circumstances. I shook my head, my other swords flashed out and hovered around me. Okita moved again, an understanding between us that the fight resumed. His swings were now infused heavily with Tuki, where he had been using it sparingly before, every strike now was backed with a huge force. From the other side of the arena he swung overhead and my mirage blocked as my other swords flashed forward. He dodged them without even looking, but they changed directions and came back. He seemed a little annoyed at their persistence as they kept aiming for his openings. I gestured with my hand, and Dawnbreaker exploded in light, swinging horizontally through the air. He was forced to raise his sword to block, and was even pushed back a few feet. Ducking his head, Whisper passed by, and he had to quickly step back before Ascalon pierced through his arm. That is surprisingly annoying. It's like I'm fighting several people at once. He grunted, knocking away Dawnbreaker for a second time. Just as he said that, his eyes glanced to me and suddenly my swords were attacking empty air. A katana pierced towards me through the arena, a tiny opening was all he needed to escape and even counterattack. Sixth form, fluttering petals. As the words left his mouth, all that was left in his wake were a few flower petals that fell to the ground. A sword technique, not his vaunted style, but powerful nonetheless. The tip of his sword met the flat of Mirage, and I pushed with my full weight to bear the brunt of his attack. Even so, my sword was pushed back into my chest and with a shout his Tuki expanded at the sword point, causing an explosion as he retreated. The dust settled, and I saw Okita waiting for me on the other side of the arena. My sleeves were destroyed, as was a good portion of my clothes. A few nasty burns here or there, but I was otherwise okay. He gave me a cocky little smile as he raised his sword above his head and his body snaked down, low to the ground. Third form, lightning sigil. His sword came at me from several directions, like arcs of lightning, jagged and hard to path as they tried to pierce me. My flying swords shot out, intercepting the blows with ease. Ha, didn't think that one would work. He hopped back a few steps again, readying his blade. Annoying, Izzy, shield please. I called out. What? Okita asked in confusion as I smiled my eyes looking up to the sky and he followed my gaze. Thor's hammer. I called out as the sky collected lightning and a massive figure appeared above us in the cloudy heavens, composed entirely of the crackling element. The massive figure brought his hammer down and Okita tried to escape the attack. I just smiled innocently as he looked at my apparent, suicidal attack. The area was enveloped in lightning, the arena almost completely gone. I even limited the wide-scaled attack to target this more narrowed area. My primordial rune shimmered and faded, my protection disappeared before the smoke cleared up. I glanced around and saw that Izzy did protect everyone, but she looked rather annoyed at my sudden request. My eyes turned back to my opponent though. I would have been disappointed if this did end him, even if he wasn't taking this seriously. Ha! He let out a breath, some blood trailing down his lips. Can't believe I let you get one over on me like that, I feel like I'm getting really old. His entire right arm looked completely scorched, clearly using it to block the brunt of the attack, even if other parts of him were hurt. The spell probably broke through his Tuki briefly. Whisper floated down from the sky where it had cast the spell, his eyes following the trail of its red glow. Crafty. He commented, not at all off-put by my hidden attack. I don't suppose you'd want to stick only to swordplay. He smiled awkwardly, rubbing his charred arm. I'll tell you what, I'll end this with a sword technique. I nodded at his request, even if it were more of a joke. He blinked and laughed. I wish I had been able to teach you all those years ago. Turning his expression into a sigh. I kept my expression neutral, but that struck a small chord with me. Really making it hard to hate you right now. My swords returned to my ring, and I deactivated any magics I was preparing for. Even my physical enhancements were gone. To others, it may have looked like I had given up, but Okita looked extremely focused. I leveled Mirage next to me, taking in a deep breath. I closed my eyes before opening them slowly. The infinite paths opening up before me, showing all avenues of attack. The multicolor glow of the kaleidoscope burst out before my eyes. Swallow returns. Okita didn't react, the words only met his ears as my sword was being pulled out from his body, our backs only a few inches apart as I straightened myself up and pulled my weapon free, taking a few steps away. He fell to the ground, his sword clanking against the remains of the arena as it dropped from his hands. He was still breathing. I didn't know how to treat him, part of me wanted to just kill him and be done with it, an act of deviance against those who wronged me, but I also couldn't bring myself to hate this man. I looked down at him again. Don't come after me anymore. I said quietly. But that didn't also mean I wasn't feeling ecstatic. Like I was finally untangled with some baggage I had been carrying around with me. A weight had been lifted off my shoulders and I felt truly free. A song came to my head, one I heard when I was a child. I had strings, but now I'm free. I hummed, and as I left the arena. There are no strings on me. Izanami POV. Well, that was certainly something. I set my phone down to stop recording. I glanced over at Yasaka, and she seemed quite surprised by what had just occurred. I can't really blame her, I did not expect the fight to end so abruptly. There were several things that I wanted to seek out answers on. They seemed content to just match each other for many exchanges. Then Will decided to bring out a large-scale magical attack out of nowhere. Brat, telling me abruptly to put a shield up around us. It was a good tactic, and he seemed unharmed from his own spell, so I can't really say anything against what he did. But that final attack, I don't know what he did. It was like, fate rewound and then fast-forwarded according to his whims. That is most certainly not something a mortal should be capable of. At one point, there appeared to be two of him attacking simultaneously. Okita defended against the one attack him from the front, but it didn't matter as he was pierced by the Wilhelm from behind. I could tell that both of them were real, as opposed to some kind of illusion or a creation of sheer speed. You have quite a few secrets, Wilhelm. I looked down and Kuna's eyes practically sparkled as she watched her daddy fight. It was still amusing to think about, yet I could completely see him acting as a father. It seems like it's my turn now. I stepped forward towards Yasaka. I shall take him. She was broken from whatever stupor she was in. Lady Izanami, are you? I do not intend to harm him. I will make sure he does not die and deliver him back to his master. I stated plainly. My annoyance with him aside, that look on Will's face when the man appeared still made me upset. That stupid boy, telling me that him and his father are merely estranged. It is clearly much more than that. Is that so? Yasaka steeled her expression. A message is it? She raised her eyebrow. I do not like others touching things I care about. While the strongest of the devils is someone I begrudgingly admit is stronger than me, it does not mean his people can do whatever they want. I may not win against him in a fight, but I'm more than capable of making him lose. Those ridiculous world's strongest ratings are mostly nonsense. Yes, I would not be able to win against someone like Indra in battle, but it is not like he would be able to destroy me with ease just because he is ranked above me. I watched Yasaka's lips curled up, giving me a knowing smile. He looked quite good, didn't he? Fighting against someone whose name is world-renowned. She fanned her face exaggeratedly, giving me another sly look. He performed adequately. I responded. She pursed her lips. I may need to stake my claim sooner than I thought. If he goes around and does this more often, imagine how many women would want a piece of him. This fox, trying to even tease me, is she? Are you that intent of us becoming sisters? I turned towards her, take a step closer. Perhaps you wish to get more familiar with one another? Yasaka's eyes widened briefly, before a large grin emerged on her face and she started to giggle. Fine. She waved me off. Point taken, I won't meddle anymore. I crossed my arms, a small smile on my face. But I wouldn't be against it either. She smirked at me, almost making me react. You are one horny fox. Girl, the last time I was with a man can be measured in years. She deadpanned. I guess it would be difficult to bring any kind of lover around Kunu if they weren't going to become a permanent figure in her life. I tilted my head, mentally calculating the time for me. Centuries. I muttered. Do women count? Well, if we do then, it's a lot shorter than that. She laughed. Well, I do appreciate how she is relaxed in my presence. I don't exactly hate her being friendly with me. It's nice to not have someone reeling back because of my existence. I should probably grab him, before he bleeds out. I sighed. That would be bad. She nodded. I don't think I could wash my hands of this if he bled out on my front yard. I walked over to him, letting my shadows grab him and bring him somewhere else for now. Keeping him intact wasn't hard. He wouldn't die on my watch, and I needed him alive to send my message. I enjoyed my time with you, thank you for your hospitality. She smiled. You are welcome back anytime. I'm sure my little Kunu wouldn't mind seeing her Auntie Izzy in the future. Moom. Kunu gave another little squeak and I had to resist the urge to scoop her up from where she was sitting and hug her. Thank you, Mrs. Anami. She stood up and bowed, her ears twitching slightly on her head. Cute. I headed off in the direction where Will went. Wilhelm POV. Wow. I was going to be riding his high for a long, long time. Wilhelm. Izzy's voice sounded off behind me. I straightened myself up, the bench I was sitting on not very large as I made room. She walked over, sitting right next to me. How are you doing? Good. I said almost absent-mindedly. I mean, relatively speaking. I think I'm doing better than I have been for a while now. Would you like a hug? She asked. What? I was a bit surprised by her request. You seemed a bit distressed earlier before the fight, and I did not know if you were still upset. I apologize if I was too forward. I know we haven't known each other for that long, and... Izzy. I cut her off. I would love a hug. She made a small little noise as I wrapped my arms around her. She was a bit hesitant, but she reciprocated all the same. I guess I held some stuff back. I spoke as we separated. Only some very important details. She rolled her eyes. I could tell she was annoyed at me, but not angry. I was born to Kaioshin. I leaned back, looking up at the sky. My mother died when I was young, and I was taken in by my father's people. I lived in a house by myself. I grew up all alone, and when I finally left that life behind, I changed my name to match my grandfather's. It was one of the first times I've ever talked about this. I was pretty much forced into a certain box to live my life. Every time I attempted to leave that little neat box, I was forced back into it. That's probably where my resentment of my father comes in. They didn't know I knew magic, so one day I just up and left, with a bit of fanfare. Wow, just kind of blurted it all out. I saw her smile faintly, not so much appreciating my little backstory, but more so that I was trusting her with something personal. I honestly cannot picture you going about mundane schooling. She mused. I let out a small snort. To be truthful, it really grated on me at some points. I shook my head. Not all of my memories of that time were something to dismiss. But it wasn't all bad. I was also in the theater club. That I can believe. She said almost instantly. Oi, what's that supposed to mean? Well, I don't want to stereotype. Are you implying? I am implying nothing. I'm pretty sure you are. It must be your imagination. She smiled lightly. I was merely saying that you can be rather flamboyant sometimes. Sure, that's what you were thinking about. I rolled my eyes. I think someone's miffed about the whole barrier thing earlier. I suppose you are smarter than you look. She pursed her lips. Yeah. I yawned, stretching my arms. What's going to happen with Okita? I kinda just left him there, too caught up in my own head. I took him. Oh. I paused. And what are your plans with him? I was going to send him back to his master. She said plainly. Well, alrighty then. She looked at me. Are you not curious? What? Did you think I would assume you were going to torture him or something? I leaned my head onto her shoulder. You know I trust you, right? So it appears. She whispered. I was going to take him back to Yomi, so I could send him to the devil's underworld. Easier that way. Metaphysically, I guess Yomi is closer than Earth to Hell. That is correct, though I would have to go through Hades' realm. She paused. It has been a while since I've contacted him. Persephone is generally okay to speak with. I haven't heard good things about Hades. You sure that's a good idea? The relationships between death deities is different than that of the corresponding pantheons. She explained. Perhaps it is a sort of kinship, but most pantheons don't have much contact with their deathly realms, minus those reward-based afterlives like Valhalla. She sighed. Hell, Hades, me, Yama, Anubis, Ereshkigal, etc. While pantheons for the most part like to pretend other gods do not exist, we keep in touch with a cordial relationship. Huh, I did not know that. I was actually surprised, but it made quite a bit of sense. Now that I think about it, we generally gather every few centuries and we haven't in quite a long time. She hummed. I wonder if there will be another gathering soon. Really? What do you all talk about? We mostly just bitch about whatever happened recently. She let out a small laugh. Hades talks about his idiot brothers, Yama doesn't shut up about how overworked he is, Ereshkigal about how barely any souls come to her realm anymore. I should probably seek out Persephone instead of Hades, that girl gets jealous so easily. Izzy shook her head. Are you going to be okay? She asked me again. I sat up and took a deep breath. I'm good, really. I paused for a moment. And I may disappear for a bit, probably won't be reachable by phone. I have some things I need to take care of. Is that so? How long do you intend to be gone? She asked. No more than a couple weeks, probably. I did some mental calculations in my head. She stood up, waving her hand and summoning a portal down to Yomi. I will see you at a later time. See you later. I waved her off. I'm really happy I met her. I'm annoyed you didn't use me. Really? Why don't I just paint a giant target on my back? I'm sure that would be the easier option. No one knows I'm even here. What if Albion shows up? He'll think he's ahead of me. Or, what if we wait until shit really hits the fan, then bam. Boosted gear comes out and saves the day, would be cooler than just a duel where nobody saw. Drea grumbled but relented, you better not be blue balling me here. There is some shit I have to deal with here in the future. I sighed, thinking about the messes my presence will have likely caused. Are we going to a new world soon? Yeah, I wanted to spend some time with Kunu, then I was going to leave. You sound like such a dad already. Fuck off. I rolled my eyes. I couldn't help it, I honestly don't know what came over me when it comes to that little girl. Though I want to look for a way to develop my power of destruction. I yawned again, standing up from my seat. I've been thinking about a lot of stuff, and I think it's time to stop holding myself back from that. Power of destruction is pretty good, it would do you well to develop it. Yeah. I scratched my cheek. I probably could have done something by now, but better late than never. The more I think about it, the more confused I am about how this even came about. But, honestly, I wasn't complaining. Alright, now pick anyone you want. I held out a stack of cards. This one. Kunu pulled one out of the deck. Alright, make sure you remember it. I shuffled the deck of cards. Now, show your mother, but absolutely don't let me see it. Mom. Kunu called out to Yasaka who was sitting nearby, watching with a small smile on her face. I see it, sweetie. Okay, now remember, don't tell me what it is, okay? Okay. She nodded. What card is it? It's... Don't tell me. I teased her with a little boop her on the forehead. Now, put it back in the deck. I turned away. Okay, you remember what it was, right? Yes. She nodded. After shuffling for a moment I held the deck up. Now. I wiggled my fingers. Abracadabra. I exclaimed, pulled the card off the top. Is this your card? No. Kunu looked confused. Oops, my mistake. I shook my head, drawing another card. It's this one. I exclaimed again, showing the next card. Nope. This one. No. What about this one? Nuha. I started going through each and every card until there was only one left. Okay, then this one must be your card. I pulled out the last card and waved it around. That's not it. Kunu pouted. I scratched my head as all the cards from the deck were now in a messy pile on the ground. Huh, you know what? I think your mom might have your card. I looked over to her, and she just blinked in confusion, then looked down at the table she was sitting at to see a card face down next to her. Kunu ran over and picked it up for both her and Yasaka to see. This is it. She shouted excitedly. How? Yasaka looked at me with eyes widened. I cheated, but it's fine as long as Kunu is happy. And I got to get one over on Yasaka. Ha! Curse me, will you? A magician doesn't reveal their secrets. I took my hat off and bowed. Standing straight, I held my hat out and all the cards flew off the ground into my little storage space. I'll get your secrets eventually. Yasaka gave me a look that promised she would get her way. Mom, don't ruin the magic. Kunu pulled on her mom's sleeve. Yeah, don't ruin the magic. I held back a laugh. Oh, being ganged up on by both my daughter and her father, woe is me. Moon. Kunu whined again. It seems like that still embarrasses her. She's so cute, I can't even. Lady Yasaka. A Tengu dropped down from the sky, kneeling before the Yukai leader. He bowed his head and presented a letter. She unfolded it, reading it intently as her expression turned into a scowl. Wilhelm, would you please watch Kunu for a little bit? I have something that requires my undivided attention. No problem. I nodded. The amount of trust one managed to garner that she would willingly leave her daughter in my hands. Though I guess it was unlikely I would do anything from her perspective, having brought her daughter back in the first place. Be a good girl for your daddy. Yasaka gave a kiss on Kunu's forehead, much to the little girl's chagrin. I'll be back in a little bit. She flashed me a smile and disappeared away with the Tengu. Well, now that your mom is gone, I can show you my super secret magic trick. I winked at the little kitsune who looked a tiny bit hesitant with her mom no longer there. Super secret? I held my hat upside down. You ready? I smiled as I reached inside and pulled out Sir Wiggles. Kuno practically squealed as she pounced on the rabbit. He's so cute. Sir Wiggles took it in stride, allowing himself to be picked up by the unknown girl and his fur stroked. What's his name? He is Sir Wigglesbottom Fluffytail Octavius Benedict III, Crown Prince of the Emerald Kingdom. Duke of Carrot Island. Oh god damn it. Hee hee. Or, Sir Wiggles for short. She squealed, pushing her face into his fur. If only for this singular moment, making Sir Wiggles my familiar was worth it. It makes me not want to leave after this, but I suppose having something to come back to is nice as well. Seeing her play around with Sir Wiggles, it gave me something I didn't know I needed before now. Izzy, Kuno, I guess I have some important people bonding me to this world, I can't very well abandon it now, even if I wanted to before. My intent was just to take a passive approach, deal with threats to the world as they popped up to sort of curb my karmic debt here, but that doesn't really seem like an option anymore. I don't want to allow anything to exist that could threaten them. I couldn't help but sigh, even as a smile never faded from my face. This was supposed to be a vacation, but I seemed to have found something amazing. Princess. A few yokai walked out into the courtyard, calling out towards Kuno. Your mother requests you. Was it that time already? I looked up at the sky and the sun was already setting. Time really does fly. Shall I take you back to your mom? I smiled down at Kuno, who didn't look like she wanted to leave. That will not be necessary, you are dismissed, human. One of the guards stepped forward. I paused, then just sighed again. I guess something happened and they don't want an outside here for the time being. Well, this is goodbye. I pat Kuno on the head. No. She said quietly, hugging Sir Wiggles tighter. Hey, I'll be back, okay? I kneeled down next to her. Promise? Of course. I held out my pinky. Pinky promise. She giggled slightly as we interlocked them. She let Sir Wiggles jump out of her hands and into my hat again. The look she gave me was frankly heartbreaking. Gods, how did I get attached to this girl so quickly? I just don't understand it. This way. One of the guards ushered me, a little annoyance on his face. Odd. Well, whatever. I stepped out of the courtyard, the guard following close behind me. Would you pass on my goodbyes to Lady Yasaka? I'm going away for a bit and won't have a chance to speak again for a while. He just snorted. Get moving, human. I paused, my instinct was flaring that something was wrong. I turned around and narrowed my eyes at him. What exactly is your... No. Daddy. A loud scream echoed out across the compound. My head snapped to the direction of the voice. I didn't even look as the guard escorting me drew a weapon, aiming for my neck. It never reached me as his head started rolling on the ground and Mirage flew next to me. What happened next was sort of a blur. I burst back to where I was before, seeing a yokai trying to rein in a struggling Kuno with several more standing around. It only took a moment for her to be in my arms again, and about a dozen bodies falling to the ground. An explosion erupted not too far away, the shockwave managing to ruffle my hair. She's over here. A shout was heard as a few more people burst into the courtyard. Human, hand over. The others stared at shock as the one speaking fell to the ground, his head bouncing onto the grass, my sword floating next to me with a small trail of blood down the edge of the blade. Daddy, where's Mom? Kuno looked like she was about to have a panic attack. This could not be healthy for a girl this young who had been through something traumatic not too long ago. I'll go get her, okay? I pat her head. No, don't leave me. She cried. I'll put you somewhere safe. I whispered gently. My grandfather can watch over you, and he has a very nice student who is like a sister to me, she'll love to meet you. I opened a portal and quickly ushered her in. She was in shock and I didn't want to make things worse. Fuck. Did you just send her to another world? Yeah. I said quietly, running a hand through my hair, staring at the few remaining yokai who were watching my warily. I griped my hand, using telekinesis to yank one off the building ledge he was standing on, bring him down to the ground with a thump. I quickly stomped on his back as my swords flashed out and made quick work of his friends. You have 10 seconds, speak. He coughed out some blood. Disgusting human, your time will come. I sneered, holding out my hand for Mirage to fly back into my grip, then slamming the blade down onto his neck. I turned around as another portal opened up, a very familiar application of the Kaleidoscope. Artoria. I blurted out as she walked from the portal. Will. She nodded. What are you doing here? Did Gramps send you? You dropped a crying child into the kitchen, do you think we wouldn't be worried? She raised an eyebrow. It isn't too hard to make the leap to assume that whatever is happening was enough that you couldn't guarantee her safety. It's not as bad as it looks. I may have panicked and reacted on instinct to one of the only places I could think of that was safe. I admitted. Is she? Artoria gave a small smile. Zelrich was quick to calm her down, and Rin is good at distracting her. I see. I ran a hand over my face. Good, that's good. Will, what's going on? Someone attacked, probably some remnants who are pissed off. I don't know everything, but I think Yasaka may be in danger, or she is the danger, I don't exactly know what's going on. Someone tried to grab Kunu again and... I paused for a moment thinking everything through rationally. She was betrayed, no doubt someone close to her was able to pull some strings so she was separated from her daughter. I muttered. Why? Why go after Kunu, again? I mean, it was the easiest target if you wanted to get to Yasaka, but what's so important that you needed that kind of leverage? Will, focus. I snapped out of my thoughts. Right. I clenched my fists. Well, you're already here, and it isn't quite what I had in mind for a date, but would you like to take care of some would-be kidnappers with me? She steeled her expression, a look on her face that promised pain for whoever was behind this. I would be delighted. Someone was going to fucking pay for making my daughter cry. Artoria followed behind me as we moved through the compound. I actually didn't know where Yasaka was, nor where the main fights were happening. Every so often, I could find some people, usually able to tell who is the enemy and who isn't. There were some surprisingly powerful foes that popped up. And equally surprising, there were friendlies who engaged them. Honestly, I did not expect this faction to have such powerful combatants waiting in reserve like they were. Several who would fit under the banner of ultimate class, even if that whole system of measurement was basically malarkey. How you doing on mana? I quickly asked as we scaled a rooftop to get a better view. I'm full, and I was given this. She took out a jewel I didn't recognize, but I could see it was full of Rin's magical energy. Zelrich said it should work for an emergency. Ah, good thinking. Though, it wasn't a perfect recovery tool for her magical energy. Since she was a servant, a spiritual being, she couldn't generate magical energy as if she were alive. And trying to forcefully drain the jewel of its contents would cause much of it to go to waste, simply running off in the process. I looked around and noticed a much bigger fight in the distance. Tengu were taking to the skies, and several groups clashing while some large explosions lit up the sky. Many types of yokai I couldn't recognize at a glance were joining the fray. Wilhelm, there. She pointed a little off to the side, a swirling pillar of mist burst out. I briefly saw a woman with 9 tails, I assume that is the woman you're looking for. Yeah, and that should be Dimension Lost. I muttered. Dimension Lost? She asked in confusion. Shit, I never did talk about the sacred gears here, think of them as noble phantasms. I didn't really have time to explain the differences, but I would rather he be wary of the strange weapons than not. Noted. She nodded. Do you have a plan? Yeah. I took in a deep breath. Teach some kids a lesson they will not forget. I frowned, trying to rack my brain around who all was in that little faction of theirs. Kids. Idiots who think they can do whatever they want because of some stuff they inherited from their ancestors or some other nonsense. I will follow your lead. I smiled, holding out my hand as she took it, and I pulled us both through a portal right to the big dome of mist. I put my hand on the large dome and cast my gaze inside briefly. I saw Yasaka battling a group of people and somewhat handling herself, but she was slightly wounded here and there. Without a second thought, I drew Mirage and pulled on the Kaleidoscope. With a slash, I cut through the false dimension that was cutting off the fight from the outside world. The mist dispersed aggressively, stopping the fight as all eyes turned to us. Wilhelm. Yasaka called out as she retreated several yards back. You. I saw George shout from the corner of my eye. The hero faction. More of them that I didn't recognize off the top of my head. I guess the lesson I taught you last time wasn't enough. I lazily replied, not giving him much attention. Yasaka quickly reached our side, perhaps trying to buy herself a moment's respite. Kunu, where is she? Her eyes practically dilating. She's with my grandfather, completely safe. I gave her a reassuring smile. Yasaka let out a long breath. Good. She said quietly. A big boulder a bit away started trembling and a large man climbed out of some accumulated rubble. Fucking bitch. He spat as he stood up, dusting himself off. Friend of yours? I raised an eyebrow, glancing at Yasaka. She sneered. Idiot calling himself Hercules, said he was going to harm my daughter. Ah, the idiot who boasts about having inherited the spirit of Hercules, and I looked around and noticed a blonde girl. If I recalled correctly, she is the same but with Jean Dark. I paused, reining in my quickly flaring temper. Did he now? What about you? Her eyes turned to Artoria, standing to the side. I don't believe we met. She's the one who I grabbed to heal Kunu before. Greetings, I am Artoria. Artoria stated. Wilhelm, is it? Another voice cut through the tension in the air. I recognized the person and the spear he held at a glance. Chow Chow, are you trying to run your ancestor's name through the mud even more than you have already? I didn't want to hear any spiel he was going to give. So you do know me. Well, usually I don't remember, dumbass, but kudos, you are leagues above the common rabble. He frowned. I don't think he was used to people insulting him so blatantly. This doesn't concern you. Why are you risking your life for these, Yukai? Are you trying to find common ground with me, perhaps convince me to step to the side? I rolled my eyes. Besides, saying I'm risking my life implies anyone in your little posse can even take it. I was going to break him. I could snap you like a twig. Hercules shouted. A little magician and a little girl he brought with him, why are we even talking? A little girl? Artoria quietly repeated, a small twitch of her eyes told me exactly how she felt right now. I grew up on the internet, insults don't really faze me, but I'm sure it's an entirely different matter for her. He's all yours. I smiled towards my girlfriend, eyes not leaving Chow Chow. I wanted this little faction of his to be destroyed before I finished dealing with him. What, am I supposed to be scared of her? He laughed. Come on then, little girl, I'll show you a real man. He threw his head back, posing like an idiot. You can even have the first hit. He didn't even try to hide his laughter. Artoria didn't answer, instead her magical energy exploded off her. Armor formed around her body, her armaments manifesting from within. Her dragon's core practically roared to life as everyone in the area felt her presence. She moved before most people here could even understand what was going on, a fist buried itself deep into Hercules' stomach. I saw everything as I reinforced my eyes. Every moment as his eyes widened, blood flowed out of his throat, and his body practically crumbled and lifted off the ground, only to be blown into the side of the building. Oh. Yasaka said quietly, perhaps readjusting some thoughts she had about Artoria. Honestly, I should have been paying more attention, but one thought was distracting me. I fucking want her right now. Reign in the dragon. I don't even care if anyone is watching. I want to make her mine. Maybe she's having some sort of effect on you because of her magical core's origin. Probably. I reluctantly pushed down those thoughts, with a mental promise for later, when we eventually get to that part in a relationship. Watch out. I ducked to the side as a certain holy spear passed by my head. Oh shit, yeah, god-killing holy spear, need to pay attention. A kid covered in shadows suddenly charged, swiping his hands in the air. Shadows rose up from the ground like blades and swept the area. Oh, sacred gear, noted. Yasaka bat them away easily enough, the tuki pulsing off her was palpable. I don't suppose you know anything about them. Edgy kid wearing the sunglasses manipulates shadows with a sacred gear, equally edge name. I spoke, dodging another swipe of the true Longinus. That's barely helpful. She deadpanned, stomping on the ground, creating many boulders that she grabbed with her tuki and threw at the shadow manipulator. My sword swung out, as holy sorta burst out of the ground like thorns. None were powerful by themselves, but holy power was still practically lethal to me. Discount Jean Dark can create holy swords, forget the name of that one too. I noticed. Yasaka shouted, throwing a large waft of fox fire at edgy shadow guy before cracking him across the face with her fist. That's gotta hurt. Words can be hurtful. Discount Jean spoke, creating many more holy swords that burst out of the ground. Seems like she can do that on any surface. Well, you should give it a try, would be a better shot at actually damaging me. I retorted, stomping on the ground myself, raising an earth wall between us. I ducked under the true Longinus, but this time Chow Chow entered my range, using his spear as an actual spear with some degree of mastery. Despite my dislike for the guy, he was quite good, but he was no scat hack. I gripped Mirage in my hand, deflecting each blow, knocking any his thrusts, and any attempts he made to inject holy power into me. There was no hesitance to get close to me, he was adept enough to fight with such a long spear in close combat. Hell, he was actually fairly quick. I wouldn't say he was on par with Okita in terms of pure speed, but his eyes were able to follow my movements. When I attempted to exploit his openings, he was able to react in time to not be skewered. What an annoying opponent though, he only had to lean into his spear's power to eventually defeat me, from his perspective that is. A decent hit from that thing's edge and I would go down like a sack of potatoes. Bindings of Gaia. I invoked one of my 9 realm spells, Whisper doing the casting so I didn't have to distract myself. The roots burst out of the ground, almost as if they were alive and shot out towards all the enemies in the area. Chow Chow swung his spear around, cutting them, only for more to burst out as he grabbed some distance. Jean flicked her sword attacking the incoming tide with her own barrage of holy swords, seemingly putting them into a temporary stalemate as it took many swords to fell one large root. I wasn't done. Freezing winds of Jotunheim, I spread my arms out as the deathly cold cascaded out in all directions, taking caution not to encroach on my allies. Chow Chow slammed his spear into the ground, his holy light surrounding him like a barrier, but Jean took the brunt of it, a root grabbing her leg and the cold air catching a stray limb before she could escape. Her arm did not look to be in good shape, a deep blue color as if all heat in it had died. I didn't have time to mull over the thought as Chow Chow's spear extended towards me again, taking off a few stray hairs. I decided to cast all my physical enhancement spells, earning a surprise noise from him as I closed the distance and slammed my sword down on his spear, cracking the ground under the blow. What? He spat out, arms shuddering under the blow. And sus. I invoked a rune, shooting it into the distance as the space sort of vibrated, revealing a George who was preparing a large-scale spell in a tiny subdimension. Whisper launched up to the sky where he was preparing to cast it, disrupting it with my own runic insertions. I took a step back as Yasaka launched a kick at Chow Chow who brought up his spear to block, knocking him back several yards. Handle the magician, please. Yasaka looked towards me, bursting from the spot she was in towards Chow Chow and Jean. Fine. I muttered, focusing on George. Yasaka probably would want her own time beating the crap out of these guys and it was kind of hard to do with a kid who could manipulate Dominions interfering. George snorted, waving his hand and bringing forth dozens of magical circles, a small smirk on his face. I raised up Mirage, spell circles began to spin around the blade, my magical energy soared, and the kaleidoscope vibrated. Ether cannon. George's eyes widened as all his spells flailed hopelessly against my cannon, and he shot out the dimension lost in an attempt to seal the attack, only for it to push through like the sacred gear was paper. George, Chow Chow shouted, an expression of shock on his face for the first time this fight. He tried to run to where the collision happened, but Yasaka intercepted him, laying down attacks with enough force to shatter the area. Chow Chow took a few good hits, blood running down his face before he regained his footing. You don't get to flee from me after attacking my daughter. She growled, the area literally quaking with her steps, even as she reined herself in. She was after her own pound of flesh, the fact that she wasn't going full on fox was telling of how much she wanted to handle this intimately. Fuck off, bitch. The Shadow Kid ran at her, arms wrapped in his shadowy power and started pulling all the shadows along with him. Thorn of inky darkness shot up out of the ground, they coalesced and reshaped to his whims, all aiming for Yasaka so Chow Chow could disengage. I looked over to the side and saw Artoria handing Hercules his ass even as he used his sacred gear to attack her. Is that all? Her words echoed across the battlefield as an explosion rang out in her palm where she caught his fist, not even budging. What the hell? Hercules shouted, his muscle visibly tightening and straining to try and move her but failing miserably. Clench your teeth, boy. The only warning he's got before she reeled back her fist again. Oof, those sounds he made sent a shiver down my spine. If I remembered correctly, his sacred gear caused explosions on impact. She caught the explosion at point blank and didn't even react, must have thrown him for a loop. I shook my head with a small smile, turning my attention back to Jean. Jean slammed her sword into the ground with her good arm, a massive dome of holy swords started forming around me. Cute trick, actually pretty smart, but hopeless. 200 birds. I swung Mirage in all directions, destroying the holy sword prison before it could fully form. She didn't relent, every swing of her sword, many more holy swords followed in its wake, but she was trying to overcome quality with quantity, and she most certainly was not in the best of shape. I snapped my fingers, several runic circles appeared above me. Lightning. I called out, one of my simple arias to invoke my spell as bolts of lightning cascaded down on the one who hosted the spirit of Jean d'Arc. Her sword, her rapier, thrust quickly in my directions, intercepting the magical lightning. Impressive. Flicking my hand, a few talismans appeared between my fingers. 3 elements sealing formation. I invoked as my 3 talisman flew out to surround her. They formed a triangular sealing spell, her body became visible stiff as her movements became hampered. Runes spun around my arm as I pushed them on the ground next to her, reinforcing the spell to a further degree. Can you not handle this little girl's blows? Artoria's fight seemed to get near us as she began taunting him, not even drawing her weapon. I saw her look over here many times, but she didn't move to interfere, probably because we weren't really in any danger. The shadow guy was keeping Yasaka distracted, purely because he would not stay down. If any sufficiently lethal attack was about to land on him, he would kind of fuse with the shadows and mitigate the damage. I could tell Yasaka was starting to get annoyed, and I would rather she not start throwing around blows that topple buildings in this constrained area. I withdrew a certain bloodthirsty spear from my ring, aiming for a moment, the muscles in my arms bulged as I threw it with all my might. It shot across the battlefield, the magical energy mixed with the intense bloodlust drew eyes from everyone, but the shadow user couldn't even react in time as it caught him, carrying him to the side of the building, impaling him through the chest. I turned to look at Chow Chow, who was supporting a very hurt George. Mildly surprised he was still alive, even if it wasn't a very strong ether cannon, was still an ether cannon. The irony of impaling the spiritual successor of Kanla with Gibalg. I spoke towards the holy spear wielder who grit his teeth. Yeah, Shadow Kid inherited the spirit of Siyu Chulin's son, who died to his father's spear. He was kind of forgettable, so I didn't remember until a few moments ago. If looks could kill. Well, I doubt he's even a fraction as furious as I am about Kunu. I looked at Jean, who still couldn't move, and nodded to myself. It wasn't the strongest sealing spell I knew, but it was fairly robust. Artoria threw the beaten body of Hercules on the ground near us, striding over without even being winded. Chow Chow was silent, looking around at his defeated comrades. George, we need Sieg and Arthur. He looked at his barely conscious companion. George was not in good shape, half his body was burnt pretty bad, and I don't think his right arm could even be called an arm anymore. Chow Chow pulled off a necklace he kept under his collar, a small vial in his hand as he poured it on George. A visible phenomenon alighted over the boy's mangled body. A phoenix tear, interesting. The tears of the devil phoenixes that live in the underworld, that so-called Pillar Clan. One of the most potent healing items that can be purchased on the market. But even with that, he didn't look all that good. But he still responded, the dimension lost connecting space as 2 more people walked out. The aforementioned Arthur and Sieg looked around. One looked like a typical English gentleman, the other wore a priest's coat. I'll take the one dressed as a priest. Yasaka walked up next to me, she was looking a bit better, even if she still had dried blood on her. Sieg looked at her, pulling out 2 swords. Balance Breaker, Chaos Edge Azura Ravage, he called out as 4 more arms sprouted from his back, each wielding a demonic sword, while one was holding a light sword. I'll handle the fox, you get the other one, Arthur. He called out. Twice critical. A subspecies, I believe. Neat. I guess I am your opponent then. The other one turned towards Artoria. I am Arthur Pendragon. I suppose I cannot hold back anything. His gaze briefly swept the broken bodies of his teammates. Artoria paused, hearing his name. Are you one of his descendants? I am. He nodded, almost uncaring about the battlefield. It is tradition in my family to name each successive generation after the king. I am not the first Arthur Pendragon. But I have grown accustomed to the name, even if I think the convention is droll. A light erupted from his body, and a holy sword appeared in his hand. I wield the strongest holy sword, Caliban, prepare yourself. Artoria narrowed her eyes at the proclamation, I couldn't dare to even guess her thoughts right now. She took her own stance, invisible sword summoned. The sword this Arthur wielded, it was large, like a great sword, but he wielded it expertly. I could tell even Artoria was mildly impressed by his swordsmanship as she didn't stomp him right from the beginning. But, you could begin to see Arthur getting a bit restless, nearly every move he made was countered with ease and experience he couldn't overcome. Even with Artoria's smaller stature, he was being dealt blows with far greater weight behind them than anything he could muster. He had to practically retreat on every collision. They clashed many times, Arthur never even making a comment on her invisible sword as he gradually got used to its dimensions, even able to counterattack every now and then. I knew Artoria enough to see she was holding back, but I didn't understand why. In fact, it seemed like they were sticking to purely swordsmanship, like an unspoken agreement between both of them. Actually, something strange was happening. I wanted to say that Arthur was hesitant to attack, but even looked rather perplexed at what was happening. After a moment, Artoria even stopped as Arthur's sword swept towards her head. A clean strike, the which could have decapitated her, stopped. Arthur was straining himself, trying his best to force the blade forward, but it refused to budge. It wouldn't even touch her skin with its edge. The sword started to vibrate in Arthur's hands, the holy glow intensified, and Arthur showed a painful look as he suddenly shouted, jumping away, sword falling to the ground and sporting some nasty burns on his hands. The sword sticking up out of the ground, Artoria stared at it. Arthur looked on in shock as she hesitantly placed a hand on the hilt. The blade burst out with a golden light, blindingly bright as it began to shift. Does it change shape to fit the wielder's desire? Artoria muttered at the now much smaller blade still impaled into the ground. Hello, old friend, it has been a while. It did in fact do that if I recalled correctly. One of the sword's many abilities. The new golden words engraved on the sword were easy to read. Whosoever pulleth out this sword from the stone is rightwise king of all England. Artoria dismissed her invisible sword, gripping Caliban tight and pulling it from the ground without any resistance. What? Arthur whispered, clearly in shock. How? Not even the church. Only someone of his blood should be able to wield that sword. I will be taking this for now, whether you can regain it in the future has yet to be determined. She declared, almost inviting him to disagree with her. Surrender, this fight is not worth continuing. Arthur looked down at the sword being pointed at him and raised his arms in the air in surrender, seemingly no will to fight in his eyes. Well, isn't that something? Yasaka practically snuck up on me, throwing the body of her opponent on top of Hercules's prone form. I believe a few secrets have been hidden from me. She mused. I guess I was distracted. What? How did you defeat Siegfried? Chow Chow looked at Yasaka in shock. Did you seriously believe this brat who hasn't even seen 3 decades could match me? She scoffed. I have ruled over the yokai in this region for centuries, boy. The only reason I hadn't crushed you all so easily before was that boy manipulating dimensions, and my unwillingness to cause collateral damage. Do you truly think I am defeated? Chow Chow stood up, an edge in his voice, gripping his spear tightly. The hero always slays the monster in the end. By all means, use your balance breaker. I lazily replied. Make this interesting for me. He sneered at me. Balance breaker, Polar Knight Longinus Chakravartin. The holy aura around him exploded out, it became suffocating for someone like me to stand here. A large halo-like ring floated behind him with several orbs. I'm pretty sure each of those orbs corresponds to a specific ability, but the details escape me. Mirage flew into my hand, Dawnbreaker, Whisper, and Ascalon spun around me, waiting. I snapped my fingers, a circle of runes burst out underneath Chow Chow, he looked down as they glowed and exploded. What an absurd holy power. I couldn't help but comment, as he was completely enveloped in a shield. It was almost like fighting an archangel. Astsusa Ratana, Chow Chow declared as my head snapped behind me, spear being thrust into my back. A pure teleportation, able to slip through my perception, I barely even noticed the space around me shudder. Was it because of the holy power? No time to contemplate. The spire didn't pierce my form shattered as I appeared to the side and swiped my sword at him. Let's see how you deal with your weapon being destroyed, Chetsuka Ratana. His spear moved towards my sword, a collision of energy burst out at the meeting point of our two weapons. His eyes narrowed and his expression changed. Why won't your sword break? He suddenly shouted as he broke off the attack. Isn't it obvious? I sneered. You're too weak. He tried to use a weapon-breaking ability on me, how adorable. With the Eye of Magnus basically keeping it all together as a linchpin, he's essentially trying to destroy a divine construct. Fine, I will end this in one blow then. He calmed himself, but killing intent was still in his eyes. The holy power around him went another qualitative change, if it was intense before, it was almost obscene now. I felt a sense of danger at this. Balanayaka Ratana, he roared as all the accumulated holy power gathered and released right at me. Shield of Asgard, I put out my strongest defensive spell, and I included a primordial rune in the creation. It was big enough to envelop both Yasaka and Artoria so they didn't get swept up in our battle. The buildings behind me were obliterated, and even through the shield, I felt the intense light try to penetrate into me. Impossible. Chow Chow muttered as the attack finally died down, to see me standing strong after what was probably his strongest attack. His arms sagged, and his spear no longer holding its powerful killing intent. Good, his spirit has broken just as his faction has. Shouldn't have targeted my daughter. He let out a scream as my swords pierced him from all directions, falling to the ground. His spear fell next to him with a clank. I want it. You might be able to take it, it has its own amount of intelligence. Really? That or kill you, call it a coin flip. I'll try later, maybe. I shook my head, putting it into my ring without touching it. Well, that takes care of that then. Yasaka walked up to Chow Chow, staring at his unmoving body. My swords returned to my ring, but he still didn't move. I'm pretty sure he's still alive, but none of my business anymore, and I'm sure Yasaka also wants her pound of flesh. All yours to deal with. I said towards the Yukai leader. You give me the best presents. She cooed. Lady Yasaka, I request suitable imprisonment for this one. Artoria walked up, Arthur awkwardly following behind her. Yasaka stared at him, her rage very much still apparent. I will, not execute him, but he will be punished. That is all I ask. She nodded. I didn't speak up, the look in her eyes was rather telling. I could see that Artoria felt some sense of responsibility for the one who claimed to be her alternate's descendant. I would leave it to her to deal with him then. Actually, I think they're all still alive. I muttered looking around and saw Kanla still breathing haggardly, having been unable to free himself. Jean was still bound, her body a mess and her arm looked dead. Hercules was broken underneath the other one, or rather Siegfried. Pretty sure he might be dead, actually. George was a bit better if handicapped now, but unconscious and Chow Chow, well fuck him. I paid no mind to the growing pool of blood forming around him. All's well that ends well. I guess it's time to clean up this mess. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.